Welcome back to the Senior Spaces Podcast. The Senior Spaces Podcast is an offshoot of the Senior Spaces television show, the reality show that we made that talks about how seniors can live the next chapter of their lives, the things they need to consider as they're looking at the next chapter of their lives, whether they want to age in place, maybe downsize, or maybe move into a senior living community. You can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and also Spotify. So you would definitely want to subscribe to get the latest episodes. We're going to take a little bit of a different direction here today, but it is all related to how people need to live the next chapter of their lives, because it's not just about the spaces that seniors live in, but it's how they set themselves up for success. So here today is my guest, Brett Frankenberg. Brett, how you doing today?
I'm good, Brian. Good to see you.
You too. So I'm going to lead off with a couple of quotes that you sent to me, and then we'll talk about why you're here to talk about that.
Sure.
All right. So 2 quotes. Number 1, the baseline reality. According to the Trust and Will 2026 Estate Planning Report, a staggering 56% of American adults have no estate planning documents whatsoever. This means they lack a will, they lack a trust, medical power of attorney, which is not just about when you pass away, but it's who's going to be responsible for your decisions if you're incapacitated, financial POA, or a HIPAA authorization. So that's number 1, and we'll do a deeper dive. Second one, the 40% court metric. In major metropolitan areas, and I would say it's safe to assume San Diego is one of those, probate courts are overwhelmed. For instance, data from MSD Lawyers shows that 40% of all probate court cases in LA County involve active trust disputes. So think about that. People are arguing over what they're going to do with the trust, with their family's situation, and so on. These cases crowd court dockets daily because of family infighting over asset distributions. And probate's triggered when people don't have these things in place. So again, we're not just talking about the spaces that seniors are in, but we're talking about how they set themselves up for success later in life and beyond. So, Brett, what's your background and how can you speak to these things?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. So I am a veteran of the healthcare system, 33 years as a licensed clinician. I have a master's degree in physical therapy. I also have a master's degree in healthcare administration. And for a long time, I worked as a clinician, and then I kind of ascended, if you will, to healthcare executive positions. Most recently, my last quote unquote job was as COO of a home health company. And what I found was I was working in a system that was so broken, and so I really wanted to continue to serve people in the best way that I could. So I became a board certified patient advocate, and I got into advocacy mostly because people really don't, once they get into the system has you,
Yeah.
right? And they don't really know what to do. And they don't know who the questions to ask. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of pressure. Time compresses because oftentimes if you're in the hospital wants you out. And so what happens is we want to trust that system to do what's best for us or our loved one, but the reality is there's a lot of forces at play. And if you are not advocating for yourself, or if someone is not advocating for you while you're in that hospital bed, you're really at the mercy of what the discharge planners' relationships are and things like that. So I started the advocacy firm, Apex Health Advocates, last year. Had a lot of really incredibly interesting cases, but what I kept coming back to was that there was really an opportunity to serve people a little bit better. And so I just added fiduciary services to my portfolio of services, acquiring a California professional fiduciary license, because I really feel what I saw in the advocacy work is that people were unprepared. The estate planning conversation around death and dying is the conversation nobody wants to have.
Right.
It's very easy to put that off.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want to pay an attorney, $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to have a very uncomfortable conversation?
No, thank you.
Correct.
People would rather plan their vacations than that type of stuff.
That's exactly right. And so, and the other thing is, that's something that everybody's always going to get around to, right? We'll get to that. We'll get to that. And then, I know a lot of estate planning attorneys, and they'll talk about, people in their 70s and 80s walking into their office and putting an estate plan in place for the first time.
Wow.
And I think what people don't understand is that the estate plan isn't just about death and dying. In fact, that's a very small part of it.
Yeah.
And really what it's about is it's about making your wishes known. And where it relates to senior spaces and where it relates to senior living in general is, what do you want? How do you want to age? Do you want to age in place? There's mechanisms to do that. Do you want to go to a continuing care retirement community and live a country club lifestyle? There's mechanisms to do that. But if you're not having those conversations and you're not putting those wishes down in documentation, and you're not having the conversation with your family after the fact
Right.
to say, hey, this is what I want, then I think there's a missed opportunity there to really set the rest of your life up the way you want it to be, and controlling the things that you can't control. What you can't control is a crisis,
Right.
right? You can't control a sudden diagnosis, a car accident. You can't control those things. But what you can control is who's going to make the decisions for you if you cannot make those decisions. And you can control the decisions that are going to be made by making them before something happens.
Right. So you brought up a good point. I took some notes here. We're talking about sort of the after and the before. And when you started in your career about a year ago, you were helping people with the after, advocating for them afterwards.
Well said.
But now you're taking a look and saying, we need to help people in the before mode. You want to still help them in the after. Of course, they need that. Crisis occurs. But it's the before, the planning. That's not happening.
It's not. And that was the first statistic that you read, that a lot of people, they're aware of estate plans. They're aware that they need to put health directives in place, but they don't act on it.
Right.
And, you being a real estate professional, you probably know more than anyone, if you own a home in San Diego County and you don't have a trust,
Yep.
you're setting your family up for a tremendous amount of acrimony.
Yeah.
And so then if you go a step further and you say, okay, well, I believe you, and I'll put a trust together and I'll put an estate plan together.
I'll get there.
We'll get there. Then a lot of people are going to want to name their children as the durable power of attorney or the DPOA and their trustee. And that might be okay for a lot of people, but in a lot of circumstances, it's not. And that's the second statistic that you read. So 40% of the docket in probate courts in major metropolitan areas are trust litigation. That's family suing family.
Right. Brothers against brothers.
100%.
I mean, crazy stuff.
Yes. Why? Well, maybe in the writing of that estate plan, we chose the older kid, or maybe there's a couple younger kids, and we didn't make those people aware that this person's going to hold these positions. Often we don't make that person aware that they're holding that position. And what a lot of people don't understand is when you put your kid in that position, there's legal responsibility. You're held to the same standard as a licensed professional fiduciary like myself in a court of law. There is legal ramification. But it goes further than that for me. It's also about, again, making sure that that person knows your wishes, but that they're willing to carry them out under pressure. So if you're incapacitated and your durable power of attorney needs to make a decision, and you've had that conversation with them and they're following your wishes, and the rest of the family is descending upon that person saying, no, don't do that, that creates a lot of tension. And sometimes, and I've seen it, I've been in hospital rooms with brother and sister fighting over mom while mom was in the bed as to what mom would want.
Yeah.
And what that ultimately ends up doing is it erodes the family, it divides the family, and it creates a lot of tension in a situation that's already emotionally charged. Everybody's already on pins and needles because of this diagnosis or what's going to happen to mom or dad. And then if mom or dad passes away, and now the durable power of attorney, that ends with death, and now they're administering that trust, and that older sibling goes to distribute money, or maybe they don't,
Hmm.
to their siblings, and their siblings are still upset about the decisions that were made in the hospital room.
Oh yeah.
And by the way, they might also remember the time that the older sibling kicked sand in their face at the beach when
Right.
they were 6 and 9.
Yeah. I mean, that's the stuff that comes up.
Absolutely does. And so, now, mom and dad maybe have worked their whole lives, they've saved diligently, they've invested, they have a nice estate to pass on to future generations. And that's being eroded by trust litigation because of the acrimony that exists. And that breaks my heart, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. And so my new role is called private health advisor. And as a private health advisor, I counsel people on their healthcare directives. I help them to understand the naming of people in that document as DPOA, durable power of attorney, and trustee and executor. And in many cases, I serve as advisor to the DPOA and or trustee, or I serve as the DPOA and the trustee. And the reason I do that is I'm professional, I'm objective, I'm unemotional, and I'm going to get to know you in the private health advisory process because we're going to talk about your wishes. We're going to talk about what happens if. I get very granular on those healthcare directives, and most attorneys don't. And it's not because they're negligent, but it's not their wheelhouse. They
Yeah.
don't know it. They don't know the specific questions to ask when clinical tipping points occur. And so by getting granular and talking about uncomfortable things, things like feeding tubes and breathing tubes and dementia and limb loss and other things that nobody wants to
Yeah.
talk about,
Right.
I get to know you. I also gather all of your health information. So the medications you take, your latest labs, your diagnostics, your doctor. And I have a software platform where I put the legal instrumentation next to the healthcare information, and we manage that. And we manage that much like a financial advisor would on a quarterly basis. We're going to meet and we're going to say, hey, Bryan, did you sell any property? Did you buy any property? Did you get married or divorced? Or maybe one of your kids got married or divorced or had a kid, or, things that might want you to contemplate changing the parameters of your estate plan. We've seen it a lot of times. I've seen several situations where there is a trust that exists. Transactions were made maybe in commercial real estate or rental properties that were never put into the trust.
Yeah.
And so people will do their estate plan. They get that big fat binder from their attorney. They stick it in the closet,
Yep.
and it
Set it
lives
and forget
and
it.
it lives there forever. And then they don't think about changing the assets that are in the trust as those assets change. And so again, there's a lot of risk and liability there. And those are the things that ultimately can result in a lot of acrimony as well, because now you have assets outside the trust,
Yeah.
could go to probate. So you could have a combined situation where you have trust settlement and administration on one hand, and then the properties outside
Oh
the
wow.
trust going to probate. So again, and then there's also the healthcare piece that we update. I will know if you're taking new medication. I can ask you about your amlodipine and if you've been diagnosed with hypertension, right?
Yeah.
And these are all things that give us clues to the puzzle. We can't predict the future, but we can have better conversations. And then now I know you. So if you decide to take a nice vacation with your family, let's say you go to Tokyo and you end up in a hospital, God forbid, and and someone contacts me, now I can get that information that is the source of truth to that hospital in a matter of minutes, and I can advocate for you across oceans. And even if you're in the US, obviously, if you're in the US, I can do the same thing.
Right.
So now I know you, and my advocacy work really is informed by my fiduciary work and my private health advisory work. And so it gives us an opportunity to really kind of have this complete wraparound service. And then when I serve as the trustee in the DPOA, what I'm doing is I'm taking all of that stress and pressure off of your
Yeah.
family. I am there. I will communicate with them. I'll make sure that they understand what's going on at all points that they need to know. But ultimately, what that does is it really removes the acrimony when it comes to the trust administration and trust settlement, because I'm going to follow what the trust says.
Right.
So as we distribute the assets to the beneficiaries, I mean, certainly they can hold me accountable, but you're paying me well to do that. I have no other motive other than to do what the trust says.
Right.
And the most important thing is when all that's said and done, the family can be the family. And
Right.
that's what's really important to me.
Right. You brought some really good points. And I wrote down a couple things. One, yeah, people tend to they do their estate plan, they put their binder in the closet. 20 years later, they haven't updated
That's
it.
right.
Maybe they actually refinanced a house and never put it back in the trust. There's so many ways that things can go wrong
That's
with
right.
that. By having a professional, it really helps with that. And I like also how you said about kind of like a financial advisor, where they'll do continual reviews with their clients. But we don't do that when it comes to our healthcare directives
We
and
don't.
other things that happen, like you said, before death.
Yeah.
When death occurs, the decisions you have to make aren't as immediate or as critical, but you got to be able to make those decisions now. Give us an example of a situation you had with a client that kind of speaks to some of these things we've been talking about.
Sure, sure. I'd be happy to do that. You brought up something that really kind of sparked something in my mind that I
Yeah.
wanted to say, and that
Yeah.
is that, the health directives too are not static, or they don't have to be static.
Right.
And people change their mind on different things. People have a different viewpoint after maybe a major medical situation. There could be situations where people find a different religion, and that might also change the decisions that they make. I'll give you just one small example there.
Yeah.
So Jehovah's Witnesses do not accept any blood products whatsoever, no transfusions whatsoever, even if it was their own blood. They don't, and so they would actually rather pass away than accept blood products. And so, if someone were to become a Jehovah's Witness after they've done their estate plan,
Yeah.
that might be something that they want to look at, because otherwise, if they can't speak for themselves and it's the document that is going to speak for them and their DPOA
Yeah.
interpreting that,
That's game changing.
absolutely is. Yeah. So I kind of omitted that in the quarterly review conversation. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that it's not just about the trust and the assets, it's about the health directives too.
Right.
And there are statistics, and I don't have any in my back pocket, but there are statistics about healthcare directives too, and it's remarkable how many people don't have those as well.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, in California, people think, oh, well, my wife, she'll be the one to make those decisions. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Yeah. I mean, usually they will default to spouse and next of kin, but the question is did you let that person really know what your wishes are?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I have a couple really interesting cases that I'm running right now. They tend to fall into buckets. So I'll give you a couple of examples. What we call solo agers, people that are truly aging by themselves. And they come in all forms there as well. I have several as clients right now. And then the others, probably the other client that comes to mind is what I would call the family out of town, right?
Okay.
So I work with a couple in Cardiff. I got her through a major back surgery earlier this year. She had 4 vertebrae fused, and then she had some complications after the surgery. Her husband is actually a retired physician, but he is in the early stages of Alzheimer's. They have 3 sons. One lives in Minneapolis. He's not really involved with the family. I wouldn't call him estranged, but he's not really involved. They have another son who is ironically the COO of a large medical practice in Phoenix, Arizona. And then the third son lives in Carlsbad, but he's part of a startup in the medical device space. And he spends probably 2 to 3 weeks a month international travel. And he's got 2 kids and he's divorced. So when it comes to the parents, there really was nobody to advocate for them on the ground. And so their son, who is in Phoenix, is the DPOA and trustee for their state plan. And I serve as his advisor, and I serve as their advocate, boots on the ground, gathering the information, looking at all that information. And I've done a lot of different things with them. We've changed neurologists. We're looking at the different infusion drugs for Alzheimer's for the husband. Um, we have gone through some psychological counseling. And again, these are all things that I've kind of lined up for them. And now what's happening is we've reached out to some community resources because um, the wife felt like she could handle what was happening with the Alzheimer's, and now she realizes she
No.
can't.
Yeah.
And so she needs some care resources. And so I'm able to bring all that into play. Right now, there's not a lot to do on their trust administration. She still handles the household finances, but I have solo agers, for example, um, where I serve as the DPOA and trustee. And so in that situation, I take on all of the financial management, not investment management. I use investment managers for that. But she, I want to say this very respectfully. She's a very simple person, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. She's never had a cell phone.
Hmm.
She doesn't have a computer or internet. And so, she was paying bills with the assistance of a friend via check, and she had no filing system.
Hmm.
And so I got involved with her earlier this year, and after we signed the trust document, I jumped in and I started kind of marshaling all of her assets, but also looking at her liabilities. And we were literally days away from her landline, her cable, and her water being turned off.
And she had no
She had
idea.
no idea. She went 2 years without homeowners insurance just because she didn't know that she didn't pay it.
Wow.
So it's these kinds of things and this is an individual who literally has nobody. She is the only child of two only children. She never married, never had kids. Her closest living relative is in Germany, and it's like a Christmas card relationship.
Right.
So there was, when she did have a stroke about 9 months ago, and her friends and neighbors rallied around her, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
But when they're standing in the hospital and the doctor says, "Who's the durable power of attorney?" and they all look
Not
at
it.
each other, yeah, they all step back.
Right.
They realized there was a problem, and so one of the caregiving organizations here in San Diego County, who you and I both know well, they were in that case after the stroke, and they brought me in. They recommended, that they bring me in, and the friends and neighbors were really supportive of me being in that position. And thankfully, we've been able to stave off, any real catastrophes there. And the nice thing is, she lives in her home. She owns it outright. Otherwise, of course, we would have known about
The insurance.
homeowners insurance. So she's got that as an asset, and she's got some other assets, but they were scattered all over the place.
Right.
And so now we're bringing them all together. We're getting a little bit more of a cohesive investment strategy for her. And the goal is for her to age in place. She's got her little dog, and she's really happy in her home. And, now I feel like we're right about there where I feel like we have enough assets on hand to keep her in her home, likely for the rest of her natural life.
That's great.
I don't see the need. The only wild card there would be if the caregiving needs really increased, or she had another type of infirmity that we couldn't predict. But she's relatively healthy, and I don't see any reason why she couldn't be there for another 10 years.
With insurance.
With insurance. Yeah.
And water and power.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's so great too is the fact that you're very well connected in we call it the senior industry.
Yes.
You know all the resources to bring in.
Yes.
People don't.
Right.
And we talk about planning, and they can, get their estate plan if they're doing what they need to do, but they don't know those resources that they might need if something comes up. And then they're trusting, like you said, people who may not, be thinking of them first and their well-being, not maliciously, but they got numbers, and they're not having access to that stuff.
Well, and let's face it. I mean, if you don't work in the industry that we work in, and you're called to action to take care of someone's needs, most people are just going to get on Google.
Right.
Right. And so now you're at the mercy of search engine optimization, and you're at the mercy of 5-star reviews and things like that. And listen, I mean, the reviews are good and they're worthy and all of that. But what that doesn't tell you, what that doesn't show you, is that for almost every service that you're looking for, there's probably, 3 to 5 different models.
Yeah.
And so the question becomes, what's right for you? And maybe it's not just a financial model, maybe it's an operational model.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a quick example. There's over 400 caregiving organizations in San Diego County.
Yeah.
And so when I meet a new one for the first time, my first question to them is, what makes you different?
Yeah.
And most of them do have some kind of differentiator. This one focuses on Parkinson's disease. This one really focuses on veterans. This one has an RN case manager that visits weekly. This one has a certain amount of training that's required before they'll put a caregiver in the home.
Right.
So these are the kinds of things that people don't realize.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy to Google something, call a number, call an agency and say, oh, you can jump in tomorrow?
Right.
Great. Now my problem's solved.
Right.
But is it?
Right.
I mean, in a lot of cases it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases it won't. And, we see it. We see it all the time. We see caregiving agencies being fired and others being hired. Different financial models.
Yeah.
There are some that work really well with long-term care insurance. Some don't. So I think what ends up happening is it's about fit.
Mm-hmm.
It's about understanding the current situation, understanding what that person or persons, if a married couple, what their wishes are for their aging plan. Where do they want to be? Who do they want to be with? How do they want to do it? The people that are ultra high net worth, that can afford to do whatever they want, they're probably going to be just fine.
Right.
But it's the people in the middle that struggle. And, and so again, what I would urge people to consider is, if you're going to put that on your kids, on your family to make those decisions for you, consider the enormous amount of stress and pressure that you're putting them under,
Yeah.
as well as the legal responsibility. And I guess the other part of it too is, you can't, as a son, I mean, I know I'm grateful to have both my parents still living. And I've been, a bedside advocate for both of them too, but I kind of know the landscape, and I know the language, and I know the questions to ask. And so it's easier for me to slide into that role. And I've been a clinician for 33 years, so I do have the ability to set aside my emotions and be professionally unattached or detached from the situation. And I think that's what a lot of people really don't understand.
Right.
And what we're seeing, what's really interesting, you and I are roughly the same age. It's people in our demographic that have recently lost a parent,
Yeah.
that have gone through the trust administration and trust settlement process, and they're turning around and saying, I am never doing that to my kids. It's
Right.
a nightmare.
Yep.
Because it's literally being dropped into a foreign world, and with all kinds of lingo and jargon and rules and legalities. And if you don't know it, it's really daunting.
Right.
And it's not something you're going to learn overnight, and it's not something you're going to learn well under pressure with high emotion.
Right. And it's high stakes stuff.
It is high stakes stuff. It is.
It's not, do you put a Band-Aid on? It's big, important stuff.
Yeah,
So
that's so true.
this has been really great. And
you.
I appreciate it, Brett. And
Yeah,
again, it's, it's a little bit different from what we normally talk about on this particular show, but it's not. It's not just the space you live in. It's how you're going to live that life, what you're going to set up for success, how you're going to help with your family be set up for success, and having those resources. So this has been educational. I
Great.
appreciate it.
I'm glad I can be of service, and I do think it's really relevant to this market because I would encourage everyone, if you have an idea of how you want to age, share it.
Yeah.
Put it on paper,
Right.
memorialize it, make sure that everybody knows it. And the reality is if you do that, your wishes are more likely to come true than if you don't.
Right. 100%. He's got the truth right here. We appreciate you watching and listening to the Senior Spaces podcast. Again, you can subscribe on YouTube and Spotify, where we bring you more information to help you decide how you're going to live that next chapter of your life, not just where you're going to live it, but how you're going to live it. Hope you have a great day.